There is a strange softness inside every human mind, a place where opposite truths quietly live side by side. You want closeness, yet you fear being seen. You hope for change, yet cling to the familiar. You long to understand yourself, yet hide from the answers. This contradiction doesn't mean something is wrong with a person. It means they are human. Most people move through life believing their thoughts should be clear and consistent. But the mind is a house built with many rooms, and sometimes two doors open at the same time. The paradox is not a flaw, it is a signal, a reminder that people are built of layers, of memories, instincts, and quiet fears that do not always agree. And in these inner conflicts, the truth of who someone is begins to appear. There comes a moment in every life when a person feels themselves splitting, not in a dramatic way, but in a quiet, internal pull. It happens in an ordinary hour, during an ordinary decision. Something simple, like wanting to speak up but choosing to stay silent, or wanting to stay, while every part of them moves toward the door. At first, the feeling is small, a hesitation, a pause that lingers too long, a sense that the heart is whispering two different answers at the same time. People often mistake this for confusion or weakness. They tell themselves they should know exactly what they feel, or exactly what they want. But the truth is softer and far less judgmental. The human mind is not built to move in straight lines. It is built to hold many truths at once. In this chapter, the paradox becomes visible. A person notices they crave comfort but also push it away. They desire certainty, yet feel restless when things stop changing. They yearn for connection, but fear the closeness that connection demands. And so they move through the world with this gentle contradiction, like walking with two invisible threads tied to their chest. One pulls forward, one pulls back. Neither is wrong, both are alive. This is often the first recognition that the inner world is layered, that emotions rarely arrive alone, and that wanting opposite things does not make someone broken. It simply means their mind is speaking in more than one language. The chapter ends with a simple truth settling in. The paradox does not appear to harm a person. It appears to reveal them. It shows where they are afraid, where they are hopeful, and where they are still learning how to hold their own depth. The paradox inside a person rarely begins in adulthood. It starts much earlier, in moments so small they are often forgotten. A child learns to read the world long before they learn to understand themselves, and what they learn is not always simple or consistent. Maybe they were taught to speak their mind, but punished when their honesty felt inconvenient. Maybe they were told they were loved, but only when they behaved in ways that felt easy for others. Maybe they were encouraged to be independent, yet expected to never drift too far. The roots of contradiction grow quietly in these mixed messages. A child learns to carry two emotional instructions at once. Be yourself, but not too much. Be brave, but never make mistakes. Stay close, but don't depend too deeply. Over time, this creates a subtle fracture inside them, a place where two needs coexist but never fully agree: the need to be safe and the need to be free. As they grow older, they start forming habits around these early lessons. They learn to soften their voice when their truth feels risky. They learn to hide their fears when courage is expected. They learn to smile even when something inside them tightens. And because children do not have the language to understand contradiction, they simply adapt. These adaptations become personality traits, preferences, fears, strengths, walls. By adulthood, the paradox becomes almost invisible, woven into their reactions, their relationships, their silence. This chapter asks a gentle question. What if the contradictions inside a person are not signs of confusion, but signs of early survival? It does not blame the past. It simply reveals how complexity forms, how a mind learns to protect itself, and how two opposing truths can grow from the same childhood soil. A paradox may feel emotional, but it is also biological. The human brain is not one voice, it is a network of systems, each shaped by evolution, each wanting something different. And these systems do not always agree. One part of the brain is designed for safety. It watches for danger, remembers old pain, and chooses the familiar even when the familiar hurts. Another part is built for possibility. It reaches for growth, curiosity, and the unknown. Both are essential. Both speak at the same time. This is why a person may feel themselves pulled between staying and leaving, holding on and letting go, speaking up and staying quiet. Their brain is having a conversation with itself, and the body feels every word. Psychologists call this cognitive dissonance, the discomfort that appears when two beliefs or desires conflict. But discomfort does not mean something is wrong. It means the mind is trying to process more than one truth. The emotional centers of the brain move quickly, reacting in seconds. The rational centers move slower, thinking, evaluating, doubting. The two rhythms collide. A person feels torn not because they are broken, but because their brain is doing exactly what it was designed to do, protect and expand at the same time. Even memory adds to the paradox. Old experiences create patterns that shape how a person sees the world today. The past pulls them backward. Imagination pushes them forward. The present becomes a bridge between two forces. In this chapter, the paradox becomes less mysterious and more human. It becomes clear that contradiction is not a flaw in the mind's design. It is the design. The brain is both a shelter and a compass, both a reminder of yesterday and an invitation to tomorrow. And every paradox is simply the echo of these two systems trying to coexist. There is a particular kind of exhaustion that comes from fighting yourself. It is quiet, invisible, and often misunderstood by others. A person may look calm on the outside, while inside their emotions pull in opposite directions. One part wanting to move forward, another part gripping the past like a lifeline. This is the lived experience of the paradox. Not theoretical, not distant, but felt in the chest, in the breath, in the heaviness behind everyday choices. Some moments show this clearly. A person longs for closeness but retreats the moment someone gets too near. They crave change but freeze when the change finally arrives. They dream of a different life but cling to habits that keep everything the same. It is not laziness. It is not fear alone. It is the mind trying to defend two values at once, comfort and growth, certainty and possibility. And the conflict between them can feel like an internal tug of war. Inside this quiet struggle lives frustration, not the loud, explosive kind, but the soft kind that whispers, Why can't I just choose? Why do I want both? Why do I keep stopping myself? In these moments, people often judge themselves harshly. They believe they are indecisive, inconsistent, or emotionally weak. But the truth runs deeper. The fight is not a failure. It is a sign of two important needs asking to be heard at the same time. This chapter shows that resistance is not always an enemy. Sometimes it is the mind's way of protecting old wounds. Sometimes it is fear wearing the mask of caution. Sometimes it is desire trying to grow while still learning how to feel safe. The paradox becomes personal here, no longer a concept, but an emotional landscape, a battlefield made of longing and fear, certainty and doubt. There comes a subtle moment, rarely loud, rarely dramatic, when a person stops trying to choose between their two inner voices. Something soft shifts inside them. Not a solution, not a breakthrough, just a small breath of clarity. They realize the paradox was never a mistake. It was a message. In this moment, the mind feels less like a battlefield and more like a conversation. The fear that once dominated becomes less sharp. The desire that once felt reckless becomes less overwhelming. A gentle truth begins to rise. Both sides were trying to protect something important. People often imagine change as a sudden awakening, a single moment when everything becomes clear. But the real turning point is usually quieter. It happens when someone finally pauses long enough to see their inner conflict with tenderness instead of judgment. They begin to understand that wanting two things is not a sign of confusion, it is a sign of depth, a sign that their heart is large enough to hold more than one truth. They start to notice that their desire for safety and their desire for growth are not enemies. They are partners, each guiding them in different ways. This realization does not erase the struggle, but it softens it. It creates space. For the first time, the person can look at their contradictions without feeling trapped by them. They no longer demand a simple answer from a complex mind. They begin to see themselves as layered, evolving, and allowed to be unfinished. This chapter marks the beginning of acceptance, not the kind that forces peace, but the kind that allows understanding. The paradox loses its sharpness and becomes something almost gentle, almost human. In the end, a person does not escape their paradox. They learn to live with it, not as a burden, not as a flaw, but as a quiet companion that reflects the truth of who they are. Integration does not look dramatic from the outside. There is no sudden clarity, no final answer. Instead, it arrives slowly, like dawn filtering through a half-open curtain. A soft understanding that two opposing truths can exist together without destroying each other. A person begins to notice that fear still speaks, but more gently now. Desire still pulls them forward, but with less urgency. Safety and curiosity sit beside each other, no longer fighting for control. Life becomes less about choosing one side, and more about listening to both. Some days, the paradox feels heavier. Other days, it feels like a kind of wisdom, proof that they have lived, learned, and changed. They begin to see that their contradictions hold stories, memories of who they were, dreams of who they might become, and the space in between where growth quietly happens. This chapter brings the documentary to its soft closing. It shows that healing is not the removal of complexity, but the acceptance of it. The mind remains a place where opposite forces meet, not to defeat one another, but to shape a more honest self. In this final understanding, the person realizes something simple. They do not need to choose between strength and vulnerability, between holding on and letting go, between the past that shaped them and the future that calls them. They can carry all of it. They can live with both sides. And in this gentle coexistence, the paradox stops being a conflict and becomes a quiet, human truth, one that echoes softly through every part of their life.